Hello, Andrei. I thank you for your time, firstly, for being able to talk to me about this. It's going to be my pleasure interviewing you. Could you start off with giving me your name, affiliation, and role at COP30?
Sure, easy. The pleasure is mine, by the way. My name is Andrei Polejack. I am the Director of Research and Innovation at the Brazilian National Institute for Ocean Research, which we call it INPO. At COP30, we are co-organizing together with the Global Ocean Forum and Plymouth Lab and other partners Ocean Pavilion the virtual Ocean Pavilion.
Yeah.
At the same time, we do have some events organized presentially in Belém this year.
Nice, nice, nice. I should also introduce myself as well. So I am Izzy, Israel Izzy. I go by both. And I'm a third year biology student at the University of Oxford. Um, and yeah, I've in the past I've worked with a charity called Ocean Generation who do work on promoting ocean awareness through working with different organizations and companies. So for instance, say like the Brit School. So they'll go to schools, they will give presentations about the ocean and how what's the word? How all these organizations can be more ocean friendly and ways that they can do that actively essentially. Um and yeah, no, moving on from that, I think it would be helpful if you were like able to explain to the use where current parties are in terms of negotiations relating to the ocean.
You mean for the climate COP?
Yes, for
Okay.
COP30. Yeah.
Yeah, so historically, the ocean has been kind of disguised within the climate negotiations, diplomatic negotiations.
Hmm.
Science has been pointing out to the critical role of the ocean as, the majority of the planet into the regulation of the climate, but not as that, as the biggest friend we have for mitigation of the climate change.
Hmm.
Also, we are very much concerned about the possibilities of adaptation of coastal communities, particularly those more vulnerable to the changes in climate. And those are traditional indigenous people, but also other minority groups, particularly here in Brazil. So the decision to have the 30th COP, Convention of the Parties, in Belém, Brazil, in the middle of the Amazon, was particularly important for those vulnerable communities and indigenous people. President Lula wanted the whole world to be and meet the Amazon forest because it is also another major natural system that we have in the planet that is responsible for a lot of the mitigation strategies that we use. And because of that, Belém was chosen as the city, as the entry port through the Amazon. But here in Brazil, since we have been dealing with the Amazon, the green Amazon, let's say the forest and the river, we also used the name of the blue Amazon for our territorial waters, but also the areas of interest that we have in the tropical and the South Atlantic. And that is because there is an united system, a dynamic system that links the steam that comes from the Atlantic Ocean that hits
Yeah.
the mountains in the Andes and stays in the Amazon. So if you look at the
I see.
planet, that same latitude around the planet is usually made of deserts, but not in the Amazon. And the reason for that is that
Interesting.
because the water that comes out of the ocean hits the Andes and then drips into rain and makes the rainforest in the Amazon. And in return, the rainforest has so much evapotranspiration, which is the water cycle within the plants, that
Yeah.
it makes what we call the floating river that then brings rain down to the south of Brazil and allows Brazil to be one of the biggest agricultural powers in the world. So that whole system now is under threat because of the climate change and the changes in the ocean surface temperature, but also in the hydrodynamics of Brazil itself.
I see. That's really, really interesting. I wasn't like aware of the like whole system dynamic to it. How like the water hits the Andes and then I guess like
It is very uncommon for people to know because when you look
yeah.
at a system, usually you're looking at it in silos, right? So you look at the
Yes,
ocean and you
indeed.
think only about the ocean.
Yes.
When you look at the Amazon forest, and man, that is a huge forest.
Yes.
So when
Yeah.
you look at it, you only look at the Amazon forest. And even the people that work with the forest, they usually forget about the river. And just as an anecdote, I was working with a researcher from the Amazon once, and he was trying to set up an observing system in the river. And then I told
Yeah.
him that, a few buoys would be sufficient to cover that specific part of the river, which is also a huge river. But
Yes.
then he told me that from one side of the river to the other, in that specific spot that he was working on, it had 40 kilometers.
Oh, wow.
So it's a width of a river of 40
That is
kilometers.
that is insane.
So you never
That is,
think about those,
yeah,
small details
genuinely.
that me as a human being and, a social actor comes to realize how big we are
Yeah.
talking about. This is not
Yeah.
just big, big. It's like continentally big.
Yes,
So
indeed.
when you couple those systems together with the atmosphere and what's happening in the soil as well, the major rivers that are running beneath the soil, and then you understand the water cycle that's going on in the southern hemisphere, particularly for the South Atlantic,
Yeah.
together with the circulation that comes from Antarctica, the cold waters that come really deep in the South Atlantic, and then they just rise up in front of Brazil, and then that's nutrient and heat being exchanged, and that's how the machine is working with the
Yeah.
Atlantic meridional circle ventilation, but also with the Amazon and other forest systems that we have in Brazil. So everything is really, really well connected. It's
Yeah.
us that are
Absolutely.
unable to understand all those linkages.
I see, I see. That's like very, very interesting to me as someone who is like aspiring to go into this like climate conservation kind of area, like hearing about how everything is so interconnected and how it feels like you have got to take into account so many different things and think about the like say environment as like a system with all these moving parts that you have to like diagnose. So if something changes in this part, what happens to this? And like just as a whole system, it's very, very interesting. Yeah. I guess moving on from this slightly, what would are your like expectations for the coming COP30, and what would you perceive as like a victory in terms of the ocean?
Well, when you look through the history of COPs, climate COPs, right? Uh, so the ocean was really, really incorporated not long ago. So now we're seeing it much, much better. And this particular COP, the ocean is really central to the discussions. We were expecting NDCs from countries, the national determined contributions, to come more blue or oceanic, right? So each country would be making, at least coastal states would be making, uh, um, would compromise to looking at the ocean and coastal systems in a more particular way of dealing with emissions, but also with adaptation. And that has not been proven to be as effective or as we wished it was. So NDCs, which were deposited for this COP, are not as much as we expected. But
I
what
see.
I heard from the government just last week is that in fact, those MDCs that were deposited, they have a high number of blue MDCs that we call like the ocean or coastal
Mhm.
marine systems MDCs, which is good. But from COP29 in Baku, we were expecting to have finalized the negotiation for the financial system, right? Because that's
Mm.
also critical as we move into these things cost money, right?
Yeah,
Particularly
absolutely.
adaptation measures. And as we advance in terms of developing technologies to make carbon removal, and other geoengineering
Mm.
crazy ideas that are popping out, and those also cost a lot of money, we
Yeah.
are lacking behind in giving the funds to the people who are actually being combating and fighting climate change in their own territories. So we had this expectation for COP29 in Baku that the financial system would be solved and compensations would be in place and we could move forward with the funding to develop the necessary actions. And that was not the case. So much of the negotiations for the funding system and the financial issues have moved now to COP30, which is something that we really didn't want to. This COP30 would be more about NDCs,
I
about
see.
what would be the commitments that countries by themselves would be making to
Yeah.
reduce emissions and also to think about the transition over the next few years. And
I see.
science has shown something really terrifying.
Mm.
What we were expecting through modeling and scenario building, what we were expecting to happen by the end of the century or by 2050
Mm.
is already started since
Oh, wow.
2023. So
Mm.
we are in a pace that we never, not even science predicted before. And this is terrifying in terms of us, society and
Yes,
humanity.
absolutely. Mm. I guess just very quickly, could you like outline what NDCs are and what kind of things that they would entail?
So it is the commitments that countries voluntarily decide to take
Yeah.
to reduce emissions. So basically, that's
Yes.
that,
Okay.
right? But by
That's it.
reducing emissions, they are creating mitigation strategies. That means energy transition, or in the
Mm.
case of Brazil, deforestation to combat fires and deforestation for agricultural purposes, but
Mm.
also a lot of adaptation strategies ended up as NDCs, like how do we live together with the changes that are already happening, and how don't we lose lives and also development and infrastructure, and how do we build new technology in terms of innovation to
I see.
combat and provide people dignity and lives.
Yeah.
So those NDCs are kind of a conjunct. So it's a list of commitments
Kind
that
of.
the countries
Okay.
provide
I see.
voluntarily to
Yeah.
the convention.
Interesting. I think you also mentioned how there's like a lack of funding being given to like the individuals that are actually fighting climate change as well. Could you like outline where these funds would be like coming from? Would they be like governments, charities, that kind of thing?
There are funds in terms of trust funds that were created by the convention. So
I see.
countries were supposed to contribute to those funds in, in the scale of trillions of dollars. But
Hmm.
none of that has actually happened yet. And
Yeah.
that is because the convention has set up a mechanism of monetary or non-monetary contributions to the fund. But the
Mm.
thing is, if you look at the funding mechanism that we have today for the climate change, what you actually see is a lot of funds going to mitigation strategies, which you can understand it's a global problem, right? So we
Yes.
all need to reduce emissions. And that's
Yes.
not just, this or that country, but we all need to reduce emissions.
Mm.
Uh, and less money has been gone through adaptation, which is local, nationally relevant.
Mm.
So it's like a money flow needs to go from one country to another. It's not a global issue, it's a local issue. So adaptation means how do we adapt cities? How do we adapt agricultural systems? How do we
Mm.
adapt to the moving climate? Like
Yeah.
it's
I see.
a warmer planet, sea level rise is hitting a lot of coastal cities. We have differences in the rain dynamics. So
Mm,
fluids are not flowing as they were supposed to. We have a lot of floods going on, natural disasters are rising, and extreme events are becoming more frequent. So those are adaptation strategies that we need to combine. And
I see.
these mean that they have to happen at the local level, at
Yeah.
community level. And that
Yes.
money is not getting there to help those communities to come
Mhm.
with their own solutions of adaptation.
I see. I see. It's very, very insightful. Thank you for that. Um, yeah, no, I think you also mentioned how I guess like the targets of this specific COP don't particularly or align with where you wanted them to be. Um, I was just wondering, what would like the best alternative outcome at this COP be for you? And who would need to like collaborate in order to achieve this?
Well, we are trying our best, right?
For
I
sure.
work in an
I can
institute,
imagine.
which is,
Yeah.
sorry, I work in an institute, which is like a big hub, a big network of researchers in Brazil. We go from
Yeah.
south to north. So we understand and try to translate what science has been telling us through hard truths, right? So
Yeah.
everything about the tipping points that we have in Earth and the measurements and scenario building, the modeling, and we are trying hard to expand our capacities in observing systems because we need like decades observations to understand what's actually going on in
Yeah.
the climate system. So it's not just like pinpoint measurements that we have over a few years. We need like 20, 30, 40 years of data collection to actually understand what's going on and how it's the anthropogenic component versus the natural component and what is to expect for the next years and provide answers on how to adapt to that. So that's science has been delivering its role. So for me, the big success would be like we are not dismissing science in this COP. So we are not making scientists prove themselves by other means than the scientific evidence. That's point number one. Point number two is we should finalize the financial discussions that were supposed to happen last COP and they didn't. So I was really expecting this to happen now. And we should be more ambitious in our targets for mitigation. How are we going to actually reduce emissions by the level that we need to reduce before we reach the 2 degrees Celsius
I see.
tipping point? Because the 1.5 is almost gone. We are there
Mm,
already.
I see.
So it's a rushing time. But at the same time, from my own personal perspective, and I have been also informed by science, but then humanities and social sciences, psychology, for instance, has shown us that this doom and gloom strategy that we have been approaching, like, we're all doomed, and it makes people really climate anxious and
Yeah.
kind of losing hope and thinking that they can't do anything, which is not
Yeah.
entirely true. It's not on a, I'm against the position that we should be personally held responsible. Like in your daily life, you should be, because the big emissions are not made by us, you and me, like, so the
Yeah.
big emissions is made by industry, which is
I see.
turning the wheels of, economy. So, but we are not an ever ending cornucopia of resources, of natural resources. Planet is limited in the resources it can provide. So, in my opinion, we should be thinking about putting pressure on industry and putting pressure on decision makers on how we can see through the scientific evidence the possible paths that we have to, kind of save the planet. But we
I
should
see.
do it in a hopeful way together with
Yeah.
everybody.
I see.
Like we can do it, it's like a beam of hope. We can do
Yeah.
it. It's a
Absolutely.
matter of making decisions.
I see. I see. How would you, how like effective or like yeah, or efficient would you say these communication channels are between, say, you on the ground scientists and these like, say, industry and these people in places that can actually make a difference?
You would be surprised with the amount of people, and I'm talking about individuals like you and
Mm,
me, that are also concerned and are working in those industries and sectors, right?
mm,
Uh, so my organization is like a boundary organization. We have the mandate of taking scientific evidence and translating it to policymaking and also to society. So that's a
mm.
core element of our action. In that role, what we have discovered is that a lot of the people who are working in the government they also have scientific background. So they do understand the basics of science, which is super
I see.
helpful.
Yeah,
And that is extremely different when you look at global South countries and global North countries, because in global South, the distance between the scientists and the decision makers is much smaller due to the capacities that we have developed over time, but also the number of people working in places. So it's not just we are not enough in terms of numbers. So
mm,
that makes the distance much less between scientists and decision makers than it is in other developed countries or countries in the global north. So this makes it much easier for you to deliver the information to the people. But nonetheless, um, things are not moving as fast as we wanted, right?
yeah, for sure.
We are not getting there. So there are many, many clashing interests. And even with the people working in these sectors, understanding the risks and understanding the science behind it, and being themselves fully aware and concerned, they are also pushed by other strings and wheels that we cannot see, right? So
Yes.
we still don't have access to the elite group which is
Mm,
making the wheel move. And
I see.
I think that
Yeah,
those guys are kind of the guys that build bunkers,
for
that we
sure.
see in
Yeah.
sci-fi movies.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, no, really, really, yeah, interesting insight. So, like, I guess there is that direct connection almost, or more of a connection with like people in like government who understand science, but then there's almost like a level above that that really like turns the wheel and makes the really big decisions.
And
Yeah,
they just push the buttons and they are the owners of the capital, like, so
I
they
see.
are the dominant class. And the dominant class is not much people as we think, there isn't many of them, but they are really powerful in that sense. And they are looking at their own interests, but I don't know who they are
For sure.
because they are invisible and they are in places unreachable for people like me. But
Mm,
I mean, at, at the level of public policies decisions and governments going on right now, you can see that we are also seeing it's like a huge war of uh, different ideas,
mm,
but all concerned with the same issue, which is living much better, right? So everybody's defending their own point of view. And in that defense, we're kind of creating segregation between groups, when in fact, we should all be uniting and fighting against those guys who are, the dominant class, and they are trying to make profit out of our
yeah,
work. So we are very much aware of that turning wheels, but we are working
yeah,
with the tools that we have, right? And those
yeah,
tools, in
absolutely.
my
Mm.
case, is science.
Yeah. So I guess just making the most of like what you can do with the
Yeah, all of us, right?
resources
You
that you
too,
can. Yeah.
Easy.
Yes, absolutely. I try my best. I try my best. Um, I guess moving on from this, how do you think countries could be like supported in understanding like solutions that can be done in the ocean, and how can you then like promote efforts to try and get these countries working on these solutions?
Well, I have been personally advocating that we need to level up the game in terms of capacities, technical and human capacity. So when you look at countries, this is like a grand class of things, but countries are very much different in all scenarios. But one of which, for me, is very critical is the lack of access to technologies and funding for research and training schools so they can actually build their own solutions. And you would be surprised if you have the chance to do that. I'll invite you to talk to
Mm,
people in the ground, talk to the guys who are trying to do something, and you will see how creative they have become in
mm,
terms of finding ways of producing knowledge that can inform better decision making at, community level.
mm.
You're not talking about, grand whole earth system science. We're talking about people that are making change through empirical research in the ground using, what they have in their hands. So imagine if those creative minds, those talents, would receive the similar training as you and I have received,
Yeah,
or would
indeed.
have access to the right tools that we have today developed, right? So I am a big advocate for that. We should level the game in terms of ocean science, particularly.
Yeah,
We should level this game and we should allow people to produce their own solutions. We are dismissing a lot of good knowledge just because of the lack of voice and the lack of tools.
I see. How would you say go about like incentivizing I guess stakeholders, governments to actually like invest in these individuals who focus on these creative, say nature-based solutions. Um and yeah, I guess letting them come up with these things.
Things are getting better, right? Can you see that trend moving on? We have something now today that wasn't there before. It's called bioeconomy. So
Mm,
whenever you put a value, a worth into something, it becomes much, appealing, much more appealing. So economy. So we have blue economy for the ocean, which is sustainable. It's supposed to be just, socially just and sustainable, environmentally sustainable. And we have the bioeconomy. So you already see a lot of nature-based solutions. Here in Brazil, you see a lot of research in agriculture. There's a good bulk of finance going through the funding for agriculture research, trying to make it more valuable in terms of applying technology and to diminish environmental damage. And that has been working quite well together with traditional knowledge from people that have been working in the fields for generations. So those guys know what they're talking about. They know nature around them. In the ocean, the same thing with coastal communities. So the women who are responsible for raising their families at the same time bringing food to their table and money to their pockets. Here in Brazil, they have so much knowledge about the system that they're living in, but
mm,
they don't have the proper training on the skill sets that they identified as necessary. So usually this is like top down, like, oh, you should know about this. So I'm going to be training you on ecology and earth
mm,
system
okay.
governance and, and
Mm,
business
yeah,
plans. And we never get the chance to ask them, what would you like to know? What do you feel is
I
missing
see.
in your skill sets?
Yeah,
And how can I help you to do that? So when you talk to people and open the dialogue, it's for me more efficient in terms of developing solutions and supporting those creative, talented minds that are
yeah,
in different parts of the world. But at the same time, funding is missing. And funding
I
for
see.
ocean sciences in general, we compete with other research fields such as health, especially after the COVID,
Yeah.
and agriculture and food systems and space science. And ocean science is as expensive as space research. And we are not raising funding for ocean sciences. Hopefully, we'll do that before I die.
For sure. Mm. hopefully. Um, yeah, I guess sorry, I've lost my train of thought for a second. I guess yeah, no, I was going to ask, like, so I guess I kind of illustrated how you feel like there's like a top-down almost transfer of information onto, say, people working on the ground almost. Um, do you think that there is like a big conflict between like, say, like the indigenous people and their knowledge and how they act and practice, and say like larger stakeholders coming in to influence and imparting almost their knowledge?
I can only speak for the things I know, right? So
For sure.
much of it
Yeah.
is in Brazil.
Yeah.
And I gotta tell you that these communities, they are kind of tired of being told what to do, and they
Mm.
feel a little bit exploited by researchers who come, work with them and then leave and never come back or don't deliver products anymore. So today they're very much uh, requesting that things come back to them in the way they want. So they're raising their concerns much more organized than before, which is awesome to see. It's really, really something beautiful to see. So
Yeah.
I learned everything that I'm telling you about communities. I learned with them. So
Yeah.
they were the one telling me, we're sick of this and we want
Yeah.
that. So now I've been trying, whenever I have the chance in spreading that idea, I do because of that. So here in Brazil, they know what they feel they're lacking, and they would really benefit to be exposed to different systems, knowledge systems, but
Yeah.
it's up to them to decide how to use it.
I see. Nice. Really, really interesting. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Um, I think now I'd just like to ask, like you mentioned the finances a lot, I guess, and how there is like not enough financing and funding almost for like these measures that we want to take. Like what strategies or mechanisms do you think could be explored to try and close this gap?
So we are in a challenging specific time today because ocean observing systems are or were actually maintained by a few institutions in the world who would provide the equipment and would get support from local people to deploy and then maintain and make arrangements to get those sensors in the water working throughout the year.
Mm.
And we are moving in a very dangerous direction now, in which that equipment might not be available. And we are trying to advocate that more equipment is needed, more sensors are needed in the water so we can understand the water system, but also the atmosphere and the relationship with the continents. And
Mm.
if you look at the world as it is today, the only long time series that we have are actually in places near countries who hold those technologies. So we need also to expand those observing systems to places that we have little knowledge about. And I would say South Atlantic and South Pacific both are hugely important to the Earth system, climate Earth system.
Mm.
And we are not sampling them as needed. We would need also to provide ship time, and there are good initiatives, particularly from philanthropy, to allow researchers in the ground in different countries to use research vessels and onboard equipment to do the research that they propose themselves. So this is very special, and I think that we should expand that model to more places. But we are also advancing in autonomous and remote collecting systems, right? So we have like submarines and autonomous vehicles and remotely operated small vessels that are approaching places that we couldn't get with ships. So oceanography in itself is changing with technology innovation. but that technology is still very expensive to many of us around the world. Brazil is very privileged because we do have capacity, installed capacity, and we also have industry working and developing their own devices. But even for us, it's hard to take one device here and place it somewhere else, because we're not being able to sample the South Atlantic that's just in front of us. So we should provide more equipment to different countries and be able to sample places with long time series so we can understand better what's going on.
I see. Interesting, interesting. Moving back to the ocean very quickly, what do you feel like is the main barrier between, say, including the ocean and marine like ecosystems in the climate discussion?
I think we're past that finally.
Okay, amazing.
Because we finally did it. It's been years that all the models, the climate models, were dismissing the ocean, and the ocean is like a big component of
Yeah.
the climate models, right? So when they placed, and much of that was because of the lack of data that we had for the ocean, because of the historical lack of funding to have better ocean sciences. So it's a gap that we're trying to fill in now. But I think that the ocean's finally getting to the climate
Amazing.
negotiations much better, and I think that now we're starting to be uh, considered as a knowledge system that was missing from the overall climate understanding.
I see. Perfect. And just to wrap up now, if you could give one key recommendation for promoting like ocean climate action, what would it be and why?
More science.
More science.
We need we need more science. We absolutely need more sampling and more people
Yeah.
participating. And we also need to bring along knowledge systems that are not exactly scientific. I think that science itself is changing too, very slowly, but it is changing to embrace different knowledge systems and kind of drop the, you know, science that happens in between academic institutions and have science which is more everybody on board. So I think that we're moving to that. So I would indulge all the actors that do ocean science to open their doors and welcome other systems, knowledge systems into their dialogues.
I see. Thank you so much for that. Do you have any questions for me, for instance, at all? Or
Well, easy. Are you coming to Berlin?
unfortunately not in person, but I will definitely be checking in on the virtual Ocean Pavilion.
Perfect. So I hope to see you in Brazil sometime. You gotta come down and
If I can, I'd go for it. I actually have like a friend of mine who's also a biologist who's actually going out to Belém with the Oxford Climate Society, I think, which is really, really cool. And I'm pretty jealous, but yeah. Yeah.
so this is a formal invitation for you to visit Brazil and for you to
Yes.
visit
Amazing.
IMPO, my institute, so we can connect better.
Perfect. That would be amazing. I'll definitely take that up if I can.
All right, so thank you very much, Easy. This was
Again,
fun.
thank you so much for your time.